Welcome to Read It on Reddit. Today we have AskReddit. And my question to you is, why you are not subscribed yet? Have you ever broken off a relationship with someone you really loved because their family was absolutely nuts? What was their family like? I wouldn't call it a relationship, but a girl I had been on a few dates with had invited me back to her place. Score, right? Except when we got there, she had failed to mention that her entire family lived there. So I was introduced to her mother and father and siblings at like midnight when we got back to her place, and she told them that, "We're going to my room to have sex," and her dad said, "You brought protection, right, man?" And I kind of nodded in a daze. So we went back there and did the deed. She was actually amazing in bed. After I wondered how I do the walk of shame as I passed her family on the way out, so I tried to duck out at like 3 a.m. Her dad was still in the kitchen, eating tamales. He asked me to sit down and I was like, oh fuck, but then he served me up a delicious tamale and told me frankly that his daughter liked to hurt men like me, and if I had any sense I would keep the memory of the night close and never speak to her again. I thought it was just a dad who didn't approve at first, but then her brother came in and said, "You need to run, white boy, my sister is crazy," and so I nodded sagely and then didn't take their advice. I really should have. The relationship lasted about a month and ended with my car windows being broken. I'm on the other side of this question. My family are worthless piles of crap who would diss the Pope for attention. I mean, there is something seriously wrong with them and I have no idea why I wasn't infected. Long story short, brought a girl home I was dating and it went exactly as I thought it would. First thing out of my stepdad's mouth. "Doesn't he," pointing at me, "have a tiny dick? You should come over here and sit with me." It was like an old school cartoon. Could have sworn I saw dust kick up with how fast she took off out of there. In a similar boat, I told my so early on in the relationship I was no contact with my folks. I told him I could arrange a meeting for him, but that there would never be an ongoing relationship between me and them. We've been together 4 years and he trusts that I'm right and that they're not worth the time. Yes, my first wife. Her parents had no concept of boundaries. Her older brother was in and out of rehab all the time. Her sister turned tricks to pay for drugs. We foolishly thought that we'd be able to keep them at arm's length. But she felt guilty and let them pull her back into their dysfunctional, fucked up lives. After a while I couldn't take it anymore and we split. Fortunately we had no children. I'm sorry for you, dude. My ex-wife had a similar family. She just kept pulling them closer in hopes that we'd all be able to get along, which had the same result. It just made things 10 times worse. Luckily we didn't have any kids either, but I blame myself for not knowing much about her family before we started dating, and she didn't talk about them much. I guess she wanted it to work it between us two. Either way, I feel for you. We were together 10 years. His mom cried all the time and made everything about her. Her children pooled their money to buy her an expensive TV for Christmas. When she opened it, she burst into miserable tears saying it wouldn't fit her favorite TV cabinet. Then repeated how disappointed she was to all the family all Christmas. She also referred to her daughter-in-law as the vessel that provided her grandchildren. I dated a guy for just shy of 4 years, but ended up ending it because his mother refused to let us have a future together. His mother was basically his owner. She told him where he was allowed to go, what he could spend his own money on, who he was allowed to see. The dude was 32 when we started dating, by the way. I was his rebel phase. He managed to carve out 4 hours a day, once a week, to see me, and always at my house. He insisted, every week for almost 4 years, to get pizza delivered, and always got a separate pizza to take home for his mom. The guy despised pizza, and would force down half a slice, but his mom wanted it, so that's what we had. I met his mother once, about a year in. He invited maybe 8 people round for ADD night, and he tried to sneak me past her. I ended up bumping into her later in the night and introduced myself. I went to shake her hand and she stared at it, grunted in disgust, and left the room. Cliché as it sounds, I really did think he was my soulmate, so I put up with it. We'd talk on the phone and Skype every day, text constantly, and I guess I'd convinced myself that things would get better. The final straw was when I ended up in hospital. I called him in pain, and asked him to come down as I was really scared. And he said he couldn't. He needed to take his mom to her bridge club. Less of a crazy story, more of a sad one I guess, lol. We weren't dating but we had a mutual liking for one another. Her parents were just toxic and parasitic. They expected her to marry a rich man and they'd live in luxury. She was working a good job already, but her parents and other family members were pressuring her to get rich so they'd be rich too. When they found about me, they sent me messages through Facebook and asked me how much I make and that as wedding gift I should build them a large mansion they can all live in together. I haven't seen her for about 4 years and it seems like neither have her family. She got a job abroad and cut all ties with them. She was the youngest child at the time and I had also taught her English. I had a similar situation. I had a friend in HS, great guy. Nothing romantic going on, but we had a great connection and a mutual liking for each other. However, his family was of a different religion than mine and his father just couldn't handle it. His father did everything he could to keep us apart because he thought there was a romantic relationship going on when there really wasn't. We lost touch during our college years because he went to college across the country from me, but we reconnected for a bit after college until he moved far away for a job opportunity. Beyond the issues with his father, he was also the child of parents who went through a horrific, vicious divorce, like so bad there were stories about it in the local papers. I think he was always kind of gun-shy with relationships because of it. He would date, he's handsome and personable, so he had no shortage of women interested him, but would always find something or other wrong with each woman. I think the reality was he was scared of falling for one of them and having it lead to marriage. We eventually caught up with each other on Facebook a few years back. He's doing great, but most definitely a confirmed bachelor. We're both nearing 50 these days. I can't say I'm surprised. Yes. If you have ever seen the British show Shameless, his family could have inspired this show. Good lord, where do I start? So he was my first love. We were 15 when we started dating. He had 2 older brothers, who were complete wastes of space. Neither of them had a job and had no intention of getting one. They were maybe 19 and 23. The mum worked at a school, not sure doing what exactly, but it was a rough arse school too. The dad was eerily quiet and worked for a phone company. The mum chain smoked in the house these dodgy arse cigarettes that were delivered to the house by the man I only knew as the Baka man. Anyone who did smoke them used to say they tasted really strange and nobody generally took one from her. The house had a permanent fog and haze, everything was stained yellow from them. The dad and mum were separated and would not speak to each other at all unless they were drunk, which happened every weekend. I often used to stay over on a weekend as he lived near my place of work. I had a weekend job that I needed to start early for. Every Friday night the brothers would invite their friends over and they'd drink most of the night and play video games. The dad would go out with his brother and return blind drunk, which would provoke a mild row. It would usually be enough to wake me, but I'd go back to sleep. Then, Saturday night would come. The mum and 2 brothers would go to the local working man's club. Again, imagine the jockey from Shameless, exactly the same. It was some bizarre family night out every week. They would get blind drunk and return home at around 1 a.m. in a state. I'm talking, kick the front door because we've forgotten a key kind of drunk. The eldest brother was a nasty drunk and would usually end up provoking a fight with someone either in the house or in the street. The dad would get out of bed and they'd all end up arguing. Things would get smashed. The middle brother would then come and wake my ex-BF up as they couldn't sort it themselves. He would sometimes go downstairs and try to peacemaker, or other times he'd say tell them to get lost. Inevitably though, if he didn't go down they would keep coming in the room trying to drag him into it. One time, the eldest brother came upstairs and pulled me out of bed by my hair. He claimed he thought it was my ex and it was dark. And he was drunk. The police would invariably get called and I don't know how many statements I had to give to the police. I was on first name terms with several. It was embarrassing. The older brother too. I borrowed his laptop once, with his consent, and he hadn't cleared his search history and there was some dodgy searches. Ranging from search terms involving teenage girls and animals having sex. There was a tab open already with a video that I wish I could burn my eyeballs out after seeing even just the still paused image of. He also watched me give his brother oral sex. We found him hiding in the cupboard. Said he'd meant to scare us. I only found him because I wanted to put a t-shirt of my BFS on to go to sleep and opened the door to find him there. Makes me think this wasn't the first time either. I felt so sorry for my BF at the time because he really wasn't like them at all. He was so different, but his family were the trashiest pieces of shit I had ever seen. However, at the same time, I could kind of see he just was never going to get away from them. He didn't have their anger or drunk streak, but he had no ambition. He was at college, but he put no effort in and he didn't want to do really anything with his life. I wanted to go to uni and make something of my life. I tried so much to motivate him but he just didn't have it. I tried for 3 years. And realized I had to walk away. Yes, my ex-husband. I wouldn't say nuts but his whole family had such a different concept of money/work from me and how I was raised. They were constantly living above their means and buying ridiculous things. Then when something important came along they had to scramble and borrow. For example, one time his mother borrowed cash from me, a new teacher, even though she lived abroad in a fancy penthouse with a pool. She told me she'd deposit it in her father's account and I could get it from him. When asked though he said that she had deposited it but then had to take it back. We're talking about like $100 here. I was just baffled. I thought my ex was different until he blew $3,000 of our wedding gift money we asked for honeymoon funds in lieu of gifts, on a trip he took without me and didn't think to tell me about the missing money. Just that it was no big deal and he'd put it back someday la la la. That was the last straw. My ex's parents are strict Christians. So strict that the women wear only skirts, their hair in a braid, no makeup, no tattoos, no skin in general, no piercings, no jewelry. We were in his room and were just going to get something when his mother rushed in. She did not know that her son has a partner, saw me, looked at my clothes, maxi skirt and a fingertip belly was visible, yelled at him in Russian. We quickly got out and I went home. His mother had, however, found out the phone number of my mother and complained about me. I was a whore who drive her son into sins. My first girlfriend was a nice Italian girl whose family drove me crazy. I'm a white bread Canadian, what would be called a manja cake, so that was the first strike against me in their eyes. Her mother treated me well, but the dad always looked at me as if I wore my shoes in the house or something. The first time I had dinner at their house he went into a whole speech about the etymology of the word wop, unbidden by anything I had said or done. We had to take her younger brother on dates with us. And the one time he made plans with some friends, so we could drop him off and get some alone time, he immediately ratted her out when he got home. One time we were out on the porch, my arm is around her shoulders and we're watching the sunset. Her father comes out onto the porch and makes some meaningless small talk about how the weather is so nice and that it's so nice to have such a warm evening. Found out the next day that he beat the shit out of her for being a whore in public. We talked about getting her out of that house but at the end of the day she couldn't leave her family behind. We were only together for a few months but the whole family situation was just something I couldn't deal with. The icing on the cake was when it was my birthday she went and gave me a Rolex. Again, we had only dating for a few months and I had been to her house, so I knew she wasn't from some wealthy family where money was meaningless. She assured me it was a genuine Rolex that her father had acquired. That was when I learned that he was a local mafia boss and more than a few pieces fell into place. I thanked her for the gift but gave it back as I didn't want to feel like I owed any favors to anyone. We broke up soon afterward and the next time I saw her was at a friend's wedding where she was there with her, very Italian, fiancé. I dated a young woman who came from a family of extremely devout atheists. Yes, devout atheists. Their entire thing was telling everyone about their atheism, how stupid all religious people were, and how logic and reason were the sole measure we should be judged by. Simultaneously, they were also afraid of cell phone radiation, insisted that the paleo diet was the only real way to eat, didn't believe in personal privacy, didn't believe showering every day was necessary and also saw it as their place to judge everyone who didn't conform to their very narrow lifestyle choices. Like, I'm an atheist but those people were fucking crazy. I got sick of the criticisms and having to debunk the asinine beliefs they were instilling in their daughter and left.